Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the last session for the day. Our first speaker is Christian McLean, and he'll be discussing 5G real-time. Why does that matter in a baler? Well, everyone welcome Christian.
Thank you. Okay, I've been told that all of the speakers need to compress their speeches in from 15 minutes to 10 or even 5 if possible, because the bar opens when we finish, okay? So, so that's it for the day. I've been in the waste industry for about 15 years and been working in the space of balers, compactors, material densification and trying to get material from A to B. Anyone who's in the waste game knows that waste management is about 80% logistics, transport, and the rest is knowing where to take it, right? So there's not much more to it than picking it up, carrying it, and knowing where to take it. So, and traditionally balers have been pretty boring. They're just a steel box used to make other little boxes of cardboard or little boxes of plastic or whatever, and they're not very interesting. But I'm a bit excited now because our company WastePro Gear have picked up the distribution rights for a really fancy new baler system. The technology is in the back of house. The baler is still just a steel box, but it's more about how smart the steel box is and how that integrates into the logistics elements of waste management. So I've got a little prezzo here. Have to work out how to drive this thing. So 5G, real-time, Internet of Things, why does that matter in a baler? So WastePro Gear are now the distributors for the Europress range of equipment, and they've got a very high emphasis on technology and focusing on smart and real-time and being able to talk two-way communication through to the equipment that we sell. So the Internet of Things, for those who don't know, you've been under a rock, but for those who do know, just to recap, things are things. They're hard things, machines, they're items that we wear on our person, they're things that we have in our homes. And the Internet of Things is all about being connected real time. A lot of Internet of Things devices are one way, so you get information transferred to the internet, but the technology we're talking about today transfers both to and from. So you can remote control these things and you can get a lot of great information out of them. It's all over the internet. Smart devices, it's all about data and analytics. So having the data, people say all the time, it's a pretty common catchphrase that if you don't measure it, you can't improve it, and you've got to have data to measure stuff. So we focus on the data, and then not only having the data, which is just a great bunch of numbers, analysing the data and working out how to use it in a smart way, and then taking action with the data you have and the analytic results, and then taking control. So why does that matter in a baler? Well, this slide is actually breaking all the rules on PowerPoint. You never have one slide with a lot of words, but there's a lot of information to get through, and I am going to read it because I'll miss it. But then we get into some more practical ways. So shop floor, people who are using balers, people in factories, in warehouses, at transfer stations, the supervisor or the user of the equipment, if you've got technology on board, they're getting real-time information coming through to their phones or through to the supervisor, etc., for them to help them with resource planning. Because in industry, feeding a baler is pretty mundane. You open the door, you put it in, you press the button, you walk away. You do that again, you do that again, you do that again. It doesn't get exciting until you've got to take the bale out. Then it's actually fun, right? You've got to take the bale out, tie it off, and then reset the machine. But that fun part actually takes a higher level of training than just the person who's filling it up. You've got to know how to take it out in a safe manner. So planning that is important. For the shop floor people, that's pretty much as exciting as it gets for an internet-connected baler. But for the rest of the team, this is where it starts to get exciting. So for a maintenance manager can actually get 60 or 70% of the issues that happen in equipment, can rectify them remotely and rectify them almost real time. With the information coming through to their laptops or their computers and a phone call, they can fix something that might take a day or two to fix in field, depending on what sort of technicians are available. And they're usually very simple things, like anyone who's used a laptop or a computer, you know, turn it off, reset it, turn it on, start again, and that usually fixes 80% of problems. This is a little bit more technical than that, but it means that you can get support remotely. And for remote installations, people who are managing a large fleet of equipment in the field, you can manage those assets and actually save significant amounts of money by not having to send a technician, electrician, or someone into the field every single time. So there's savings potential in days of downtime. You ring a guy up when your machine's broken down and they say, oh yeah, we'll get there tomorrow, and then they don't turn up tomorrow, they turn up the day after that. The waste doesn't stop flowing, it just piles up. So you can actually then, a maintenance manager can move to service based on time elapsed rather than hours used. In Europe, one of the ways that they actually manage safety around equipment is they monitor hours used and they service the equipment, not every year, but every 1,000 hours or every 10,000 hours or whatever number they choose. Servicing equipment that's only been used for 5 hours in a year, every year, is a waste of money, time and resources. So actually being able to service based on time elapsed is important. And then also with this sort of equipment, the service technician has to plug a laptop into the machine and press several steps to prove that they've serviced the machine. So it's unfakeable. You can't just get a fake service. An operations manager, all those other things were what a maintenance manager might be interested in. An operations manager might be interested in that human resource planning piece. You can actually tailor the bale size. So if you're wanting to fit material onto a truck, or if you want to fit it into a vessel, or you want to fit it into a different way, you can actually build bales to all different heights, so any height you choose, at the same density. So you can actually get a nice heavy little bale to fit in a certain place, in a racking or something like that. This is not quite live yet, but soon you'll be able to get automatic consumables ordering. Now, a baler's not a baler if you've got no string to tie around the bale, right? It's just called a steel box because you can't use it. So this automatic ordering, it sounds a bit mundane, but it's actually very successful. We've got a lot of customers who ring us up saying we ran out of strapping yesterday. And you go, okay, we'll get it to you. It'll take 2 days to get to you. Well, we can't do without it for 2 days. Well, why didn't you call us yesterday? Safety managers, they get some advantages as well. You can actually set lockout times in these machines so that you actually can't physically start the machine in certain hours on the weekend, in after hours, so the night shift don't accidentally get in and start doing silly things. You can point e-stop alerts to whomever you want. So if an e-stop's hit, you can have it go to nobody, you can have it go to the supervisor. We've got a client who sends it to the safety manager, and they send it to the safety manager because part of their policy is every week they're meant to test all the equipment's e-stops systems. So when this safety manager is sitting there and he every Monday morning gets 32 text messages saying e-stop tested, he feels very good that people are following his process. If he gets 5, then he knows who to call to chase up for the job not being done. Maintenance records. These are all logged electronically and stored on the internet, so they can't be faked, they can't go missing. And if you have an incident with some equipment, then you know where to go to get the information to prove to WorkSafe or whomever that you've done your servicing, etc. The logistics manager gets some benefits too. Production reporting. Now, we can get these equipment, these machines, we can calibrate them based on a sample of 10 bales or 20 bales, put that information in to the software, and it'll then predict plus or minus 5 kilos what that weight of that bale is that's coming out next. And then it adds up and counts the number of bales. So you can actually get a known weight, and it's virtually live. So we go through that in a little bit more detail. The sustainability manager, he gets or she gets some really awesome, or they get some really important materials reporting to satisfy ESG requirements. And coming soon, I'm not saying this is actually going to happen straight away, but contamination and traceability, which is huge in the recycling industry, as a lot of people here know. There's the ability and the technology to work towards getting contamination monitored in the baler before the press is done. So using AI, taking a photograph of what's in the baler before the press goes down, so you can look for contamination and you can actually potentially lock the machine out so it won't press if the wrong material's in there, if it's not cardboard, if it's not plastic, if it's not aluminium cans. And then an equipment fleet manager or someone who's in charge of rental of equipment, you can disable the unit remotely. So if you're renting equipment to somebody, if they're not paying their bill, you can just turn the machine off so they can't use it. And that sends a pretty strong message. GPS tracking of assets. So the machine, if it's plugged in, it's online and its GPS location's known. And then maintenance control I've spoken about. So all that has a lot of list of a lot of words, and I've said a lot. Some really basic things that comes down to is this. The question is, how full is my plastic baler in Queensland? You can find out real time, pull up your app, press a button, 25%. How many bales has my cardboard baler done this year? You can find that out very quickly, 42 bales. What's the weight of the silage wrap? How much weight of silage wrap have we processed in Nyngan last month? You can get that data and find that number very quickly. Why can't that guy in Balranald start his machine? Well, you can get online, you can see, and I'll show you a picture, I think I've got one coming up, that you can log into that machine and see, oh, the e-stop's been hit. And I don't know how many people here have experienced it. A lot of problems with equipment is pretty basic stuff. The e-stop's been hit, and it actually happened in our business this morning. So that was quite interesting. When do I need to order more strapping for my balers? All good, it's already done. I've mentioned that. It's coming, it's not there yet. When do I need to call the transport company for a collection? Yesterday, but don't worry, it's already been done by the automatic system. So I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. When's my service due? Next week. So you can set it up so it'll actually send you a message to say when the service is due. And that can be based on hours, it can be based on elapsed time. So there's many ways we interface with the baler. I don't know how I'm going for time. I don't think I have too much left. And people got pressure on me now because the bar needs to open as soon as possible. I don't know if you can see that very well. That's actually a screenshot from the app. And you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a stack of 6 items or assets that are sitting there on the app. I think there's 16 in that photo. They're in total. So essentially, you can get all sorts of information on your app real time. Some of the things that it's showing is the second last baler from the bottom's got a little plug sign. That means it's not plugged in. You can get one little e-stop symbol comes up there. But also one of the important things is, I don't know if you can see it on those screens, and I'm struggling to see it here. It's got like 6/20, and that means there's 6 bales made from that baler out of 20, and when it hits 20, it actually will send an email to the transport company or whoever you point that at, please collect these bales automatically. So the site doesn't have to worry, it saves a phone call, it saves people missing that out. You can look on a map and show off how many balers you've got if that tickles your fancy, but then you can actually drill in and drill right down to each of those little spots on the map of Australia and find the baler, and that zoomed in shot there says there's 3 balers at that site. I don't know if you can see it. One of them has got a 0 on it, one of them's got a 1 on it, and one of them's got a 2 on it, and that means the 0, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 are actually the fill status at the moment. We're moving shortly to 5% increments, but these are 25% increments. So one of the balers is empty, one of the balers has got a quarter full, and one of the balers is half full. And to a lot of people here, that's not really important. But if you're the operations manager of this site, that's really good information. And then the last point here, I think that's basically there to show you that you can drill into a specific baler, and there's a lot more background information on that baler. You can look at this through an interface on a web portal, so you can have not only on the app, but you can have a desktop looking at the similar or the same information. And then there's the technicians portal. So I've sort of blurred those images because there's customers' information there, but basically you can design a bale using pretty good technology. You can do analytics, and you can look at the status of that baler. And I will show this for pretty much the last thing. This is quite interesting. This is the real-time pressure graph, and anyone out there who's an engineer will get off on this, and I am not, but I get off on it. It's fun. Basically, it's got the two axes of pressure and distance, and you can see that I think that's playing. Yep, the force is building. You can see the bale building layer on layer on layer. And then who's going to watch a bale get built? This is pretty boring, but what you can use this for is to design how big you want your bale, how dense you want your bale, and it gives you a real technical and scientific way of doing the work that we need to do. So I'll actually skip this because it's basically a study that the manufacturers have done that show that there's a lot of advantages in transport and downtime savings. And a few things coming in the future. So we're improving the equipment from a 25% increment to 5% increment. You'll be able to interface with APIs from third party. And I'll skip a couple of these things because I've mentioned them already. Probably the most important thing is come and talk to us at our stand if you're interested in this at all. And we can give you all the information in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. That's excellent. The next speaker is Lacey Webb, and her presentation is about audits, not a dirty word, using tech to identify risk and best practice outcomes.
So who knew that bales were so exciting and that you wanted to show off where all your bales are? I'm an accountant, not an engineer, so clearly wasn't born the right person, but seriously, wow. So now I'm going to talk about another fun and exciting word, audits. Yes! So last year, you may have seen some of my team wandering around in little black shirts with a big symbol on the back, asking people if they wanted a free audit. So what we realised last year is that audit is a word that terrifies people. It puts the fear of God into them, and most of them ran away and went, oh no, I don't think I should tell you stuff. But the reality is that audit's really important, right? Because better that you know before the regulator arrives. Nobody wants the EPA to surprise them with things that they find. Better that you know now. So let's talk about that a bit. Ooh, let's see how this works. It goes forward. So we created a web-based application. So we created some software. It's an auditing tool called Audrey because she's auditing the resource recovery industry. You can blame my husband for that name. He loves it. So she has delivered over 300 facility assessments in the last year or so since we've actually been live across Australia. And in doing so, Audrey learns while she's delivering jobs. So she's essentially assessing landfills, transfer station MRFs, seeing what works really effectively, what doesn't, and at the same time is defining best practice standards. Now, Audrey doesn't look at the back of the site. You guys are capable of monitoring your own environmental conditions of your landfill cells. What most people ignore, though, is the boring stuff at the front of their facility. Gatehouses, things like that. So instead, Audrey's actually targeting key risk areas of operational process, internal movements, gatehouse best practice, how your transactional software is being used. It shouldn't be set and forget, and it often is. We're looking at waste levy compliance because Resource Hub is Australia's only waste levy specialty consultants. So, we love waste levy. And we're looking at other areas of compliance, including financial process, fraud, and boring stuff like admin and training. In delivering audits with Audrey, we're getting out to your sites. So we're everywhere. So we go out to MRFs, we assess how they're moving materials through their lines, why it might get being stuck on the ground, how they're actually recording that and how they're reporting it in their diversion reports to their council clients. We're spending a lot of time in gatehouses. There's a few gatehouse staff up there because often these people are the gatekeepers of what happens at our facilities. They know more than you because they see the vehicles. They sometimes fall into bad habits. They know what the data does because they touch it all the time. But they're a really important resource. We're assessing infrastructure of your facility to make sure that the customer experience is good, that you can capture information correctly, that you've got the right boom gates and traffic lights and stuff. Sorry, I've worked in the industry for 20 years. Sometimes I have to watch my language. And we're even looking for things behind the scenes. The little wheelie bin there that's tipped over was at a facility that doesn't capture containers for council. Council containers, when customers dispose of them, go in a lovely big bin. It's donated to a charity in the community. That wheelie bin was hidden behind the back of a shed. And a team member on site liked to pull all the containers out at the end of their shift every day and hide them out the back and take them down and put them in their own pocket. So those are the sorts of things that we're assessing for, that you in your own facilities often don't see because you're busy with other stuff like managing waste facilities. So how is Audrey different to any other auditing tool? So if you go out and you get yourself an iAuditor or a checklist program for doing your pre-starts or your workplace health and safety auditing, you're going to get a piece of software that they're going to help you set up the questions. You're going to define what questions you want. It might align to a standard. It might not. It might be your checklists. That's not what we do. Audrey is best practice. We have actually taken the learnings from all of these facilities, from industry, from working with many of our customers who are here this week, to define what we should and shouldn't be looking for. We also are telling you how to mitigate the risk. Okay, so I found a problem. How do I fix it? So Audrey gives you those outcomes. We work with our clients to define what's the next step. So let's talk about a case study. What does it look like in real life? Welcome to Gympie Regional Council. So Gympie Regional Council, quite publicly at the moment, has got an environmental protection order. They've had a number of non-compliances. It's been in the media. In Queensland, maybe not down south. In March 2023, we did our first audit because they had a new team come in and they said, look, we know that there's some stuff that's not right. We don't know what it is. Can you find the stuff? So we went through and we assessed some landfills, we looked at their transfer stations, and we identified 87 key risks, 23% of which had a significant financial impact or a regulatory non-compliance, meaning it was going to have big dollar values or potentially close their site down. We use that risk to actually educate the new incoming management team as to where they should start to focus. We used it to re-educate staff, to put in new process. Now, 12 months later, they have had a number of compliance notices that followed the work that they were doing, but the latest notice that they've received, by the time they got it, 7 directions, over half of them were already done. They'd already met the requirements because they'd already found the problems and they'd worked out how to solve them. What they've done is they've actually built relationship with their auditors, with their regulator, in doing this process. Audrey is a framework. Every audit that she delivers is a learning opportunity because we're defining a best practice framework for our industry. So currently, Audrey's part of my team. She's part of Resource Hub's team. We go out, any audit we've delivered, including to people standing at the back, hello Sam, any audit we've delivered, whether you realise it or not, has used Audrey so that we can deliver in a standard, fast, repeatable method. Now, however, I'm making Audrey a part of your team if you'd like her to be. Our next iteration, so we built software, we've been testing it, we are doing a new build. So we're going to unleash her on the market. So welcome to Audrey on site. Our clients, if they would like it, will have access to their own portal so that they can log in and they can do their own compliance assessments to a standard best practice framework for industry, which complies with your regulation, with your licence conditions relevant to your state, relevant to your site EAs or your ELPs, and that will allow you to get access to that, well, what should I do when shit goes wrong information. It also has a portal of cheat sheets, of guides, of video content, so that you can actually go through and work out, well, how do I fix these problems myself? I forgot to turn my start time on. How long have I got? I talk fast because I'm remembering that there's beers coming. I'm taking one for the team. So, thinking about Audrey. She, in the last 12 months, has delivered 117 facilities, returned 117 facilities in the last financial year to compliance. These are facilities who, when we went there, already had existing notices from their regulators, be it EPA New South Wales, Vic or Queensland DESI. We work all over the country. We do some jobs in WA and South Australia as well, but we haven't done audits for them. We've done other stuff. Talk to me about waste levy and financial risks later. We deliver audits generally in half the time and certainly for half the cost of most other consultancies, but certainly a lot less time and cost than you could deliver it yourselves. It's repeatable. It's aligned to a framework. We have made the lives of 37 waste managers of those 117 facilities a whole lot nicer, and we've removed the fear of the word audit, because audit shouldn't be scary. Audit should be part of your toolkit. We've also helped those 37 waste managers to develop better relationships with their regulators. Now, I had a conversation this morning with somebody and I said, oh, we've got this issue, we've got a council, 3 weeks, OPD's approved. For those of you who don't know, waste levy operational purpose deduction, the money you get for the shit you use on your facility when you want to claim it back and not pay waste levy. That's unheard of, 3 weeks. And I said, but we've got another client. They've asked us to step in. They've been waiting 13 months. And the response was, oh, you should take action against the EPA. Hell no. I want to be friends with the EPA because they make my life easier where possible. And Audrey helps to do that. We're already seeing in Queensland, across the entire state, where we work with 93% of waste levy zone councils, we're seeing their language on their notices and their requests for information reflecting the language of Audrey. They don't realise they're reflecting my language, which is what we want, because it means we are setting the standard for the front of facilities. But most importantly, the biggest outcome we've had in the last year and a bit, we've saved local governments, not including the Cleaner Ways Remondis's and Violas of the world, we've saved them $9.32 million. So that's across waste levy overpayments, that's across financial fraud, that's across contract risk when they've had challenges with their contractor. Anywhere I can find money, I'm going to find it. It doesn't include badly reconciled scrap metal. That's something you can talk to me about later as well. The number one thing, though, that Audrey does is it provides regulator confidence. If a regulator knows that you have better controls to assess your facilities and improve your operational outcomes, they're going to be less likely to come at you with a big stick and more likely to come for a chat and see if there's any opportunities to improve some outcomes. Audrey, as part of your routine, makes that possible. Audrey is not an audit tool. Audrey is the ultimate industry expert. I'll be at the booth with the grass and the lounge chairs. We have snacks, we have chairs to come and have a chat, and I'm free this week, so come and talk about anything you want to talk about. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Kurt Palmer, and his presentation is Pollutex dust suppression is the sustainable solution.
Thanks very much. I won't talk as fast as Lacey. Probably don't need to. I could never compare myself to you, Lacey. Ever. CEMAC, who are we? Really very quickly, we're a small company based in Melbourne. We import European technologies for the waste industry, combined somewhere in the range of about 45 years experience, me 15 personally. Still wonder how I've managed to survive 15 years selling machinery in this industry, but anyway, I didn't have as many grey hairs back then. Up there you can see some of the suppliers that we represent and what we do. Our services, process design, obviously equipment sale, project management, engineering, servicing, spare parts. So pretty much anything across any industry that you've got or any challenge you've got, we can probably help you with. One of the biggest things the industry is facing, one of the biggest challenges, especially with outdoor sites, is dust. And if you can see that photo, I can't see it from here, that's an all too familiar sight. And the challenges you've got around that, apart from your neighbours getting really grumpy, poor visibility, wet, dirty sites because you're trying to pour water onto dust to make it disappear. It's a health hazard for your workers, EPA will be all over that, WorkSafe's all over that. You've got high wear and tear on your equipment because water and dust just turns to grinding paste, so all of those things. And if you're pumping a load of water on there, you've got high water costs. But that's what you could have. So that site, that was a photo I took while I was in Europe. That's a site just out of Frankfurt. Interesting little site's a small C&D recycling plant down in the bottom of a quarry, surrounded by trees in the middle of an industrial area. And without Pollutex, he would have been shut down because he was only able to run, on average, about 3 days a week. Because of the dust generated, the neighbours all complained. He had to shut down. With the Pollutex system, that's running C&D waste, that site. That's a impact crusher with screen, and there's no dust. So the upshot, it's what you could have. Happy neighbours. We all like those because they don't complain to the EPA. Happy, healthy staff. Well, as happy as they can be, let's face it. It's a safe working environment. WorkSafe's going to be happy with that. More importantly, your bottom line, low wear costs on equipment and a dry site. So you've got dry material, you haven't got mud, you've got less wear and tear on your equipment, and it's just a much nicer place to work. What is it? Pollutex dust suppression foam. It is a foam. It is applied to the material. It does need to mix with the material. So ideally in front of a shredder or in front of a screen or something like that, a crusher. But it is a foam, so it has a lot less environmental challenges in terms of water, a lot less water use. You don't get a lot of water running off your conveyors, your material's not wet and sticky, stockpiles aren't leaching, all of those lovely fun things. It's not a dust suppression, it is a dust binding agent. We talk about dust suppression, but it is actually a dust binding agent. It binds the fines material, the fine particle, and stops them getting airborne. So we don't generate dust and then try and control it. We just don't generate it at all. It is a concentrated formula. You buy it as a 1,000 litre IBC. It is biodegradable. One of the key benefits, I think, anyway, personally, is effective for 5 to 10 days. So if you're running a crushing site and you're loading out pretty well constantly, which hopefully you are because that's how you're making your money, you've got efficacy during your load out and stockpiling as well. Your customers may also have efficacy there, might be efficient while they're distributing, while they're putting it on the ground wherever it's going to. So its benefits are tenfold more than just water. What do you need? What are the components? It's a really, really simple little system. You need a controller, which generates the foam. The controller consists of a dosatron, which, if you've been around the industry for a while or dealt with chemicals, they're a very commonly available metering system. You need some water, clean supply of water, and you need compressed air. The controller can be remote controlled, it can be interlinked with control system, so you turn your crusher on, you turn your circuit on, it turns on automatically, you turn it off, it turns off automatically. Been around a lot of sites where they go, I can't use foam because we end up with a yard full of foam. Well, you weren't using it properly. And then, of course, the IBC. Something weird just happened on my screen. As we talked about, environmental benefits, limited spread of airborne particles, reduced site impact on neighbouring and ecological zones. Those photos are real. I took them myself. They're from real sites with and without Pollutex foam. We've talked about most of these, but additional comparison to other methods. And let's face it, most of the other methods is pour a crap load of water on. So you're not adding weight. So any of your waste material that you're sending to landfill, you're not paying for water to go to the landfill. So it's reducing your costs. There's no further disposal. It is biodegradable. It just breaks down and disappears. There is no active ingredient that is active after the 10 days. You cannot find it anywhere. There is no leachate. There is nothing left. It is gone. Talked about that. Obviously, dust has stopped getting airborne. You don't want to generate dust and then try and control it. Just don't generate it. It's simple. You don't want to get a speeding ticket, don't speed. It's pretty simple. That's not rocket science. Misting impacts and visibility. You don't have any of those challenges. You're not making everything wet. You're not, it's very, very simple. It can be mobile. If you're running mobile equipment, we can install it on mobile gear, no problem at all. And you will reduce dramatically your amount of water. So generally on a, say, a C&D plant, crushing concrete, aggregate, rubble, you use a water rate somewhere in the 5 litres a minute with a dilution rate of active ingredient of about 2%. So there's not a lot of material, there's not a lot of input. Compressed air is probably your biggest one. What can we use it on? There's a little list: C&D, wood waste, mulching, quarrying, mining, metals, to a degree. Plastics, yep. Glass I'll talk about. If you're crushing glass and it's a problem for you, come talk to me. It doesn't work in all applications. It doesn't like getting cooked. So if you're drying your glass, no chance. Sorry about that. But if you're not and you're sorting it wet, fine, no problem. We can deal with that. Paper and textiles. Paper dust is a real issue. Fibre in the air is a real big issue, and we don't talk about it a lot, but it is a major problem. Huge health risk. You can't pour water on it because then you're bailing water. You're either sending, you're paying for bales that are 5-10+% heavier than what they should be. With Pollutex dust suppression systems, you can put it on paper. It's not absorbed into it. You're not generating the fibre dusts, but you're getting what you pay for. You're buying a 300, 400 kilo bale of paper, that's what you're getting. You're not getting 10 kilos of water. And in view that beers are available, thank you very much. If you want to talk a bit more about dust suppression or anything else that CEMAC might be able to offer, if you got any challenges, come see me, booth 54. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Kurt. The next speaker from Hyzon Motors is John Edgley, and the presentation is Fuel Cell Leading Technology.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be here under the big umbrella. We've got a few Hyzon enthusiasts here, hydrogen trucks, or just waiting till the bar opens. So just want to gauge the audience. Yeah, okay, good, thank you. We've got a pres I'll walk through here. If you're at Truck Show X yesterday in Victoria, this will be a bit repetitive. Otherwise, there may be something new here for all of you. Hyzon's been around. I started in the business in the middle of 2021. We are one of a very small handful of manufacturers of hydrogen fuel cell electric trucks in Australia and one of a handful in the world. In 2021, we started located just in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. We're owned by an American company. The fuel cell is the core technology of the business. It's why we exist. And our team in Melbourne, which is now about 60 people under one roof, roughly half of them are our engineering and integrations team that do the packaging locally for local solutions that we've also been exporting. So in March of last year, we launched our first product, which is a 6x4 dual control chassis that's explicitly designed for a side loader garbage truck. And that went into use commercially, the first one. We're talking about just one truck out of the fleet of 500,000 or so heavy duty trucks and buses and coaches on the Australian roads. So it's a starting point. Went into commercial use with Remondis in Wollongong and Shell Harbour, and I've got a little bit I'll talk to you here about because I'm sure some of you are interested in how that's been performing and where that's up to. In March of this year, we launched the Prime Mover, which is a 50-ton prime mover with a 200 kilowatt fuel cell in it that's made in our plant in Chicago. So a big part of the business is about driving, integrating fuel cells, and our engineers down in Melbourne are one of a very small handful of people that are the best in the world at integrating fuel cells into trucks to replace diesel drivetrain and create a zero emission solution that actually works. The fuel cell, if you haven't seen that before, there are many different ways of doing fuel cells, but the Hyzon claim to fame is a single stack. So one fuel cell that does that 200 kilowatts going into the prime mover. It's 110 kilowatt in the truck that's 2 down here on the left. But that gives you weight advantage. It significantly simplifies the balance of plant that makes a fuel cell work. If you don't know what a fuel cell does, we take hydrogen out of tanks, high pressure gas in our case. We mix it with oxygen from air and it spits off electrons and water. And those electrons then drive an electric drive in the truck. So zero emission solution. We wrap that fuel cell with a series of components that are necessary to make a powertrain like this work. The tanks for holding the hydrogen, the power distribution unit, which is one of the most complicated parts of the setup, with an electric motor and a transmission, of which the Chinese are probably 2 years ahead of everyone else in making compact units with multi-speeds. And we do the calibration and software integration with a perfectly good truck that started as a diesel that we put all the diesel running gear out of. So our truck that's been homologated and ADR compliant is type approved, which means that we can build multiple units of them under the Australian design rules. Is something that we've got now. We've built 10 of them in our facility down in Melbourne. We can build more, and it just shows that the level of investment and experience that we've got nationally to be able to solve an Australian problem. So there's some specs here on this truck, and you can go down and have a look at it if you haven't already. Talk to some of the Hyzon people. There's a few of them in the audience here. They'll be on the other side of the drinks once they start in short order. But the design of this truck was explicitly to match the duty cycle of a diesel, which is the real challenge for our industry. So we started with the first of our engineering team in September of 2021, and it's taken us 2.5 years to get to the point where we've got the first one in commercial operation. Part of that challenge is matching it up to hydrogen, but part of the challenge is just getting it right, complying with the Australian design rules, doing something that's rugged, that will survive the duty of the waste industry, that is supported by training and accreditation, that has an after-sales program associated with it. So it's not just making the technology work, it's making sure that it works as a genuine solution for you if you happen to operate trucks. We've covered a little bit of there, and I've got the next slide I'll just go straight onto, is the comparison that looks, is the performance and the specs on this truck next to the battery electric equivalent on the same chassis and the internal combustion engine on the same chassis. So you notice specifically against the BEV, and there is, we get asked all the time, well, is it going to be hydrogen, is it going to be battery? In these heavier duty applications, it is clear that battery is not able to achieve the same duty cycle that hydrogen is, and it certainly isn't able to replace the internal combustion engine. And that's been the message that we've heard loud and clear from one of these trucks that's been fitted out with a side loader body that was in the Waste Expo in Las Vegas last week. We exported one of those trucks over there, and we've heard it here, we've seen it here, and now we've had it resoundingly repeated back to us from the US market. So we have about 7 times less battery than the battery electric truck. We still do have batteries. They're a critical part of an electric drivetrain. We have weight concessions here in Victoria and New South Wales that allow us to go up to 26 tonnes, so we're not constrained to 23.5, which is the overlay that's on the diesel equivalent here. It means that we can get 1.7 tonnes more waste in that 24 cube compactor on the back than you would get if it was in a diesel equivalent. So the regulations won't last forever like that, giving us exemptions. But initially, and this is the important part, the next few years, the move to zero emissions, the regulators are working with us to try and help drive those solutions. This truck, fortunately, we engineered it so that we don't exceed the 6.5 tonne front axle, but the regulators will give you up to 7.5 tonne as well to accommodate some of the battery electric requirements. But the story really is about providing a truck that can do the same duty cycle as a diesel. You can also stick a few different things on there. This is a side loader down here that we've done with Superior Pack. There's a configuration that we've done for rear loaders. It's the single biggest question we get asked for that truck. Can we have it in a rear loader format? The answer is yes, it actually packages really well. It's just a matter of having volume and commitments and customers and hydrogen that line up to put these into market. The tilt tray format there, we'll have a few of those going into service in the next month or two with Nationwide, owned by the RACV in Victoria, the largest towing operator in the country. So they've got 3 of those in a 4x2 configuration. And then the EWP is something that's particularly interesting because that industry, as energy retailers, have access to their own fuel effectively through the wires that they're servicing and managing. So there's a very compelling economic justification for transitioning fleets when you can make wholesale fuel, which is the opportunity that sits in the waste industry as well. We see it in the United States. Waste Management, the largest operator with 17,000 trucks in their fleet, have said we're going to convert our 300 landfills to producing our own hydrogen, and they'll be able to fuel 15 to 17,000 of their fleet with gas that they produce from their own landfills. It's not quite as big a leap of faith there as it is here, because most of you probably know they converted about 80% of their total refuse fleet in the US is now gas anyway, harvesting gas from their landfill, pumping it into the pipes and extracting it at their transfer stations. So there's tremendous economics around waste that doesn't just, when you're producing hydrogen, doesn't just have to come from electrolysis and green electricity. You can produce it all sorts of ways. And this industry actually sits in the most advantageous position to produce what we say behind the meter fuel, without all the margins of people sitting in between, because you can produce it from the prolific waste that as humanity we more and more want to produce. So the Remondis truck went into service with them. It's a private, I'm sure many of you know Remondis, big part of this industry, privately owned by the Rethmann Group in Germany. They have a huge fleet in Europe. They have a huge energy from waste program. They've got over 70 plants in Europe doing that. They've got distribution company. They've got, they own a third of Transdev. And in Australia here, they've got a fleet of about 800, and they chose to invest in this technology because globally they're leaders in the adoption of zero emissions. That truck went into service in October on a 4-month trial. It completed that trial in January. And in the first 4 weeks of that trial, during commissioning, we passed the best performance they'd seen globally for a battery electric equivalent in the same sector on side loaders. I updated these on Friday. We get the data on how this is performing. We've done over 80,000 bin lifts with that truck. We didn't have a single day of unplanned outage during the first 4 months, so we probably overshot the mark there for first of its kind in market. We've had a few days since then of unplanned outage, to do with some of it to do with operations and matching up operations that people are used to with how the truck operates, some of it to do with power management, some of it to do with thermal management. But we, in the first 4 to 6 weeks of that operation, we very quickly went, not just for our local industry, not just for Remondis, but through the United States and Europe, we blew away any concerns that hydrogen fuel cell electric could replace diesel. And in the 4-month trial, we did 85% of every use case that Remondis has had out of Wollongong. And if you know Mount Ousley in that area, very, very steep, high grades, couldn't have picked a tougher environment for us to stress test this truck. And it is performed beyond even our expectations, and we had high expectations. It is the sort of outcome that you get. We have a full lease down at Lang Lang, which, if any of you know your car history, was the GM proving ground, built in the 1950s. We have about 25% of their capacity that we use on a daily basis to do all the testing, validation, durability testing on these trucks. And that shows in the performance that we got when we put it into commercial use. The backstory there is now we're into durability. So we're well past the will it work, and we're into, okay, what's the liability that we're taking on as Hyzon to make sure we deliver something that is suitable for you to stick in your fleets? How do we actually get it to the point where we can help partner with you to make sure that you're doing a 7 or a 10-year commitment on a contract, and you understand the after-sales cost, and you understand the cost of parts, and you understand the durability parameters of this truck, and we can make sure that you get an experience that you're used to with hundreds, decades of experience around diesel, because those trucks are really good, really efficient. They're just not zero emissions. So we're learning a lot about electronics. We're learning a lot about the way batteries operate in a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, and it is distinctly different from a battery electric vehicle. We're learning about thermal management, because a fuel cell operates at 80 degrees, doesn't have an exhaust where it can pump heat out into the atmosphere. All of that's managed through heat transfer. We've got double the radiators, for instance, on our truck than you would have in a diesel truck. We're learning about operations and how much drivers love having a bin pickup in a slightly different position or further back. than they normally used to with their diesel truck, and how they don't like the positions of wing mirrors that come with their zero-emission vehicle. Some of those we can address, and some of them... Uh-oh, that was beer. No, it wasn't. It's okay. No. And some of it is operation-based, just to do with the truck. Some of it is absolutely to do with the drivetrain. Stopping and having to switch on a dual control vehicle and taking 7 minutes instead of 2 minutes because you've got to power down a fuel cell, and that's something we've got to work on in terms of software calibration, development, the way the truck operates. And you don't really understand and learn those things until you stick one in operation, until you stick 10 in operation. By the end of this year, we'll have about 40 trucks in operation. We've got 11 hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicles in operation right now in Australia, all type approved, all ADR compliant. One of them is a garbage truck. 10 of them are off in the desert somewhere as coaches. And we will have more hitting the market as hydrogen becomes more available on the East Coast. But it is led us very quickly to the discussion that says, okay, so where to next? Because a business like ours can't survive on trials of 1 and 2. And it is using the experience of the Remondis truck specifically to then go out and articulate for the federal government the gap and the need for subsidy and the way the government should fill the gap to drive adoption of this technology. And they did it in the 90s with gas. They subsidised about 700 trucks in the market. They did it with a fuel subsidy. Some of you will probably know this well. They did it with a fuel subsidy. They did it with a truck subsidy. And they did it through the Australian Greenhouse Agency, or office, which is no longer around. But it's all what we're seeing now is a resurgence in interest around how you drive this transition. And it shouldn't be a never-ending subsidy. It needs to be a program that drives volume, because it's with scale that we get price of the trucks down. It's with scale that we get investors like Viva and like Ampol and like Pacific Energy to invest in the core hydrogen production assets and create a backbone that everyone can plug into. So there are going to be lead use customers that help make that transition. We need customer demand. We need to use that to underpin our local business to continue to provide a local solution rather than waiting another decade for the Europeans or the Americans to send something down here that is fit for purpose or specific. To support us and our other startup friends up the road here who are focused on hydrogen fuel cell electric trucks. And we need to match that up with hydrogen infrastructure. So that's what we're doing on a daily basis now, is how do we drive transition, not just to underpin Hyzon's business, because frankly supporting the American and the European markets is more than enough job to keep every one of us busy, but making sure that we have an Australian solution and that we can continue to support zero emissions transition here, which is really being led by this industry. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe.
That's all right. Thank you for that, John. Spot on, bang on 15 minutes. Well played. The next presentation is Peter Murphy, SAFF, the world-leading landfill leachate PFAS treatment technology. Everyone please welcome Peter.
Hey everyone, thank you. So I'll talk about something a little bit less popular, which is PFAS. I know it's a bit of a dirty word in the waste industry, but I'm an environmental scientist with a company called EPOC Systems. We're out of EPOC Enviro now. We're out of Sydney, Australia. And about 8 years ago, we developed a system for the extraction of PFAS from PFAS-impacted waters, and it's a process called surface active foam fractionation. So EPOC as a company has been for quite a number of years, 20-odd years, working for the Department of Defence on chemical weapons sites. So we had quite a good skill set in complex chemistries, and we also have an energy division that builds fuel infrastructure, bulk fueling infrastructure. So when Defence asked us to have a look at the problem of PFAS, we did a detailed analysis. A team of about 6 of us sat down and read a couple of 100 papers on this emerging topic and came up with 5 technologies that we might apply to deal with this problem. The trouble with PFAS chemistry is it's often called the forever chemical. It's an extremely challenging product to break down, and particularly the longer chain products exist for decades, if not hundreds of years in the environment without being able to be biodigested or chemically altered. So we had an interesting conundrum in front of us as to how we would deal with it. One of our members was a hobby aquarium keeper by the name of Dave Burns, and Dave felt that the chemistry, when we looked at the molecular phases, was quite similar to proteins, and so we looked at protein skimmers in industrial aquarium environments and decided that we might try to see whether the double electron layer that sits on an air bubble might attract the PFAS molecules. And lo and behold, from our first experiment, we discovered that not only does it do it, but it does it really well. So we have now been working we patented that process back in 2016. These blue containers, you'll see one about 20 yards off to my right, are called a SAFF 40 system, and they're a 3-stage system that I'll take you through, which really is designed to strip PFAS out of leachate waters and results in a liquid PFAS-rich hyperconcentrate. So we've now treated about 500 million litres, I suppose, of PFAS-impacted leachates at various sites in Europe and the US, and we've more recently put a system in down at Shoalhaven, our first leachate system in Australia, so that was good to get something on the home territory. But effectively it just uses the power of rising air bubbles, and if you think of the air bubbles as a sorbent medium, they're a bit like granular activated carbon or ion exchange resins. You've got a surface area on the air bubble. The tail chemistry of the PFAS molecule adheres to that, rises it up and presents it as a foam, where we harvest it out as a foam, and we really don't use anything other than atmospheric air. We draw air in from the environment. We put that through a series of venturis in the system. We have a separation phase and a concentration phase, and ultimately we produce somewhere between about we get concentration factors between 50,000 and 5 million typically. So for every 50,000 litres of PFAS that goes through, which is a typical day in a lot of landfills, we'll produce about a litre of PFAS hyperconcentrate. So over the course of a year, you've typically got less than an IBC of it, and then we've got various destruction technologies where we can get rid of it. So at the Oakey site, which is a defence base up in Queensland, we've treated about, I think, nearly 500 million litres now, and we've reduced that down to about 71 litres of PFAS hyperconcentrate. So I was just at the previous speaker mentioned a conference, the Waste 360 conference in Las Vegas, and I was just over there, and there was two things that struck out to me. One is that the waste industry really doesn't want to have to deal with PFAS, but the second thing was they're kind of slightly resigned to the fact that it's probably the logical place to harvest PFAS. It's kind of one of the about 15 to 20% of PFAS typically comes to sewage treatment plants from landfill leachates. So it is an obvious place to start the job of trying to remove PFAS from the environment. So to dive into a little bit of the chemistry of it without boring you out of the room, it's really quite simple. PFAS molecules have a functional head chemistry, and then they have a long tail of carbon molecules with 2 fluorines on each, the head and the tail of the molecule. They have a charge differential between the head and the tail, and so when they get onto that, when they come into contact with an air bubble, there's an electron charge on every air bubble, and the tail chemistry adheres to that through a subtle negative charge. The Gibbs free energy, which is kind of the energy differential between the head and the tail, it's always trying to be at its lowest point. So an air bubble gives it that lowest Gibbs free energy constant, and so it sticks to it, rises to the surface. So it's actually a very simple physical extraction process. There's no complex chemicals or additives involved, and it just presents as a froth layer, and we just have a very simple stovepipe weir system that we harvest the initial foam off, and then at that point in time the PFAS is removed from the leachate, and then we focus on the next 2 stages, which are really the concentration stages. So what we do is we take if we think of it as primary, secondary and tertiary stages in the container. The primary stage is all about separating the PFAS from the water, but it's very inefficient in terms of concentration. So typically about 10% of the treated leachate presents as a wet foam and is channeled down to a holding tank at the end of the unit. That wet foam, we then take it and then we refractionate it again. And using that second fractionation process, we also apply a vacuum to the process. So the vacuum sort of draws the foam up a large column, and then we're basically dewatering as it goes. And in that second stage, we're typically getting somewhere between 50 and 1,000 times concentration factor. And then that foam, we take it and concentrate it again, and that's where we get into the tens of thousands up to millions of times concentration factors. So one of the key messages I wanted to sort of put across is it's really not that complicated, and it's really not that huge a problem for the industry. I think PFAS sends shudders up across the industry when I hear it in conversation, but it's actually a fairly simple chemistry to extract in a physical sense from water, contrary to a lot of the concern that I think is out there around it. We've now built 38 of these systems in a containerised version. We're just in discussions with one of the bigger water treatment companies globally to look at it to treat reverse osmosis water from drinking water, and the reject from reverse osmosis systems is heavy in PFAS, but also heavy in salts and metals, which makes it the absorption isotherm, which is sort of the characteristic that allows us to extract it, is really favourable with highly saline solutions like RO reject, so it works well in that environment. And we've just got a project starting next month where we're putting it in right behind the primary screen of a sewage treatment plant to extract PFAS out of the water column, but also out of the biosolids. PFAS transitions very easily off a soil particle because the binding forces are quite weak, and we're able to transition it into the aqueous phase and strip a lot of that PFAS out before it hits the biosolid, or to stop it residing with the biosolid and presenting in the dried product, which of course is creating huge problems globally, where the biosolids are being dispersed as an agricultural amendment on broad-scale agriculture and causing low-level contamination across vast areas. So we're sort of fairly excited about the technology. If you want to come and have a look at the plant, you're more than welcome to, but it's effectively a series of 4 primary fractionation vessels. They're 2,600 litre vessels. The system will treat about 1 million litres a day. If it's a really complex leachate, it might be as low as 500,000 litres a day. So these that typically aligns with the requirement for most of the landfills we've come across. We've got one site up in Michigan where we've actually put three of these SAFF units stacked on top of each other to enhance it. They're sort of able to be plugged into series indefinitely. And then we're also building these very large systems which are about 6 metres wide and about 30 metres high, which will allow us to treat the megalitre per millions of litres per day quantities that we're seeing in the drinking water and sewage side of things. Again, I don't want to dive too deep into the chemistry, but one of the big conundrums with using air bubbles as an extraction medium is that the longer the tail, the better the adherence to the air bubble. The shorter the tail, the trickier it is to harvest those compounds. And so we've been doing a lot of work. So all of the ones within the red square, which will make up the majority that you guys will come across in your signatures, particularly PFOS, PFOA and PFHXS. Those ones are sort of the typical ones that the government's been targeting now for 4 or 5 years. So we strip those down to effectively non-detect. So if it says 99.9%, that's because our limit of reporting was 10 ppt or 10 nanograms per litre. But in effect, we get it down to non-detect for all of those products. The right-hand column is how we perform in leachate. The left-hand column is how we perform in groundwater. So you can see very similar removal rates for really clean groundwater or really dirty leachate. The process tends to work exactly the same. It doesn't really care what else is in the water. It doesn't care if there's high dissolved solids, suspended solids. It doesn't care what the DOC is. It just continues to sort of use that surface active capability to strip PFAS out. So with the addition of food grade, non-toxic surfactants, we're able to enhance that even further into the green squares. So the shorter chain compounds in those green squares, we're now getting them, as you can see in the far right column, PFHXA and PFBS, which is the most commonly cited PFAS for removal in drinking waters and industrial waters. We're getting that down to 99.9% removal now, which is, it's only really in the last 4 months we've been able to validate those results. That's like, if you get excited about that stuff like I do, it's actually a huge step forward for us in just using air-based fractionation. Instead of having to use GACs or resin or solid absorbent mediums, which you're going to have to renew, you get very rapid breakthrough through those mediums. We're kind of harnessing the power of air bubbles, which are infinitely renewable in reality. So they do their job, they pop, and then we regather them again. So we monitor pretty much every regulatory environment in the world and where the regulations are heading towards. And fortunately, the most stringent of those largely are in the US now. On the 10th of April, they set the limits for PFOS and PFOA at 4 parts per trillion, which, to give some context, is about a drop in 2 swimming pools, so 2 Olympic swimming pools. So it's an incredibly small amount of water, amount of contaminant in a very large amount of water, but we're able to get that down to those levels, so it's extremely efficient. And it works across a whole range of different types of waters. So you're able to use it, as I sort of said. There's surface waters. We do a lot of source zone work at firefighting, contaminated firefighting training areas where the AFFF foam that they put the fires out with, applied over decades, has caused these huge weeping sores in the environment that are just contamination from PFAS that are just consistently flowing, vertically migrating into the groundwater table and then passing down gradient, as you got just down the hill here in Williamstown. Huge PFAS problems. That repeats itself at about 150,000 sites around the world. So these source zones are a huge problem. They get into groundwater. A lot of industrial users use PFAS, so we're kind of also, anyone who's doing stain-resistant materials, water-repellent materials, surface coating materials to ease surface tensions, they're typically achieved using PFAS materials. So it exists everywhere. I've mentioned the R.O. brine and the sewage. So I guess that didn't really want to bang on for too long, but just wanted to let you know there is a solution out there for PFAS. I suspect, looking at the National Environmental Protection Measures here in Australia, version 4 has just been released, which is very definitively talking about PFAS, so I suspect it'll move into a regulatory framework over the next year or two, and the upshot is really landfills are going to have to, even though they're passive receivers, are probably going to have to look at this problem. And we're a homegrown solution in Australia, and at the moment I think we've probably done about 80% of the PFAS remediation sites globally, so it's a good success story for Australian industry. And anyway, you got my details there. If you need any more info, give us a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. The last speaker for the day will be Scott Woods, and the presentation is SG Advanced Compost Technology with GORE cover, pilot to full scale.
Good afternoon, and I'd just like to thank all the speakers who went before me to keep us on time. I will promise you at 5 o'clock, I want a beer as bad as you do, so we're going to be out of here. All right, let's see. So I'm with a company called Sustainable Generation. We're out of the States. We just picked up the Australia, New Zealand territory a little over a year ago. We work with GORE cover. And is anybody here familiar with GORE-TEX, the breathable waterproof? That's from the GORE company. And what GORE likes to do, you don't buy a GORE-TEX jacket, you buy a North Face jacket or something like that that has the technology embedded. GORE likes to do that. That's how they go to market. For composting systems in North America, Australia, New Zealand, they're using and embedding our technology, their technology into our products. Work every day with GORE. I'm going to talk a little bit about them here in a couple minutes got a couple announcements to make. But just in terms of GORE cover system, there's over 400 of them, systems around the world processing over 4 million tons annually. In North America, we're coming up on 70 installations. We're processing over 2 million tons annually. This year alone, we're putting in an additional 400,000 tons of capacity in the U.S. alone. We have our version of the FOGO mandates coming down the line. What was exciting for me and why I wanted to pick up this territory when we heard about Australia and the mandates for 2030, we wanted to provide a solution and provide some alternatives to some of the other technologies so you all have choices in your implementation of FOGO. Our experience in the States we call source separated organics. It's equivalent to what FOGO is here. We also do a lot of biosolids composting, and then MSW stabilization is primarily in the EU. However, we are doing our first facility in California where basically we're taking MSW and we're composting the organics fraction to stabilize it to avoid the greenhouse gas emissions. Just in terms of some of our certifications in the EU as well as several air districts in California, we've been classified as best available control technology, and we've received in the EU as well as several of the states in the US in-vessel certification. One thing that might be a little different in US is unless something's explicitly called out in the Constitution, the federal government doesn't have control, the states do. So the waste industry, for the most part, with the exception of biosolids and some of it, is controlled at a state level rather than a federal level. In addition to in-vessel and best available control technology, in California, we have to measure greenhouse gas emissions, and that's in terms of volatile organic compounds. The rule is basically you have to reduce VOC emissions by greater than 80% compared to the baseline. The baseline's open windrow composting. Have to go through testing on that. There's our results for some of our facilities. The one that matters no matter where we're at in the world is odor control. And if you look to the right, you can see odor control. The big blue bar or purple bar is open windrows, and that's from basically day one through the first 28 days. You can see how it steps down. The red and the green are when that's covered with a GORE cover. What's important about that is VOC emissions and odor emissions are both water soluble, and they follow the same curve. So if odors is a big problem everywhere, and we have the odor control to solve that problem. My talk was on pilot to full-scale type projects. I'm going to walk through two case examples, but I do want to say we've made investments here in Australia and New Zealand. We have a demonstration unit in each country. The picture on the left is the one in Australia. It's at a private company right now. It'll be freed up in about 6 months. I can't say who it is. We're under a non-disclosure. The one in New Zealand is just outside of Auckland. It also is currently with a private company. So if as we go through this, and you can see that piloting would be something that might help you in your organics diversion, come and speak to us. Jeff, we're in booth 36, is that correct, I think? We can talk about it and tell you how you can take advantage of that. So the first case study I want to talk about is moving from a garden organics, or what we would call yard waste composting operation, and introducing food organics, or source separation as we call it in the States. It's in Prince George's County, Maryland. Prince George's County is right east of our nation's capital. This facility sits about 12 kilometers from our nation's capital. In 2012, the county passed a mandate that they needed to get organics out of the landfill because of climate change, and they chose composting. This particular facility had been operating since the 1980s. We're now in year 2012 when they passed this law and decided they needed to move forward. They had a product called Leaf Grow, which was their branded compost. And what they were particularly concerned about is they'd sold it out every year for 25 years. And I know after we signed the contract, I had to go meet with the big boss. And he said, Scott, we've sold out on our compost every year, and we're really worried about our brand. Don't screw it up. So we agreed to do a 12-month, 4 seasons, because we get all 4 seasons there, pilot project, which allowed them to, number one, prove that the compost we were making was equal or better quality, and that was done through third-party lab testing. They needed to develop and test an end-to-end process. Once you get into collecting food waste, you have protrusibles. It's a different type of vehicle you're going to need to collect it with and transport it. There's the composting process. The state required a technology change. Open windrow composting is not allowed. They needed to learn to use our system, and then they needed to develop an end market for that product. And as importantly to that, they were concerned about being a good neighbor, and the good neighbor was defined by not making a stink bomb. We went through our four season testing. The outcome of that was we were successful in checking off all 3 boxes. The Leaf Grow product was comparable and slightly better than their yard waste composting or garden organics, and they actually branded their new product as Leaf Grow Plus. Fast forward in 2018, so they started this process in 2012. We finished in 2013. The county was like, great, we proved it. We're going to stop. You guys can pack up your equipment. Let's go into full-scale design. And it was, whoa, time out. They'd been taking the White House waste. They'd been taking our congressional waste, Smithsonian Institute. And there was basically an uproar from the customer base that said, you just got us started. We're just learning to do this. And now you're going to stop and we're going to have to wait 4 or 5 years. And what happened was the county said, you know what, we're going to continue this process. And they bought, you can see in the middle ground, they bought a bunch of our mobile systems. They'd started with 3 when they did the pilot process. They ended up with a total of 8 because the volumes just kept increasing. And by 2018, we built the full-scale facility that's shown in front. And they're doing currently about 57,000 tons of material between the mobiles and our bunker systems, which are in the front. Second one I want to talk about is Republic Services. This is out in California. California has a law, SB 1383, that's requiring diversion of 75% all organics by 2025. Republic Services at this particular facility had done no composting, and as a result, there was no land to do composting on, so they said, we're going to have to do this on top of our landfill. So we put together a system that was solar powered. We supplied the solar power. We are a technology company, and we began doing an end-to-end organics recycling process with them. There again, they had to look at the collection part of it, the transportation part of it, the composting part of it, and then develop a market for their end products. But most importantly for them, they were trying to get stakeholder buy-in in the communities. These were franchise-type operations with public entities, and they wanted to get all their stakeholders to buy in, and ultimately the stakeholders were going to need to pay for that via a rate increase. So they used their pilot process to do all of that. Because this was top of landfill, it was going to be about $1 million to run power up to that, and they said that won't work. So that was the driver behind the solar power. And they said, by the way, we're putting it on cells that eventually we're going to go back and go up some more, so we need a system that's very movable. So we supplied all that with our mobile technology with solar power. Fast forward to 2022, we put in a solar-powered 60,000 ton per year facility. That's being shown right there. You can see right above that, there's a development going in. Those are all million-dollar homes. So they were concerned about the odors, which is one of the reasons why they went with our technology. We just shipped them another 30,000 capacity of our systems, and in Q4 this year we'll be installing that, and they'll be taking this system. They're actually moving it. The cell that this is currently shown on is going to be active beginning in 2025, so we're moving it to a different part of the landfill, and they'll have, we believe it's the largest solar-powered compost facility in the world at 90,000 tons. So one of the things, I was here last year, and one of the tunnel people cornered me and was like, yeah, well, you guys can do all that, but it's not fully enclosed. And I haven't seen that person here, but, and I know when Jeff and I are out talking to some of the councils, they like that whole concept of fully enclosed. We're doing that. We've been doing it for a different reason. We've been doing it up in Canada because of snow and be able to operate in the winter. But I'm going to just walk you through a FOGO operation that this came online last year. It's in the Comox Valley Regional District on Vancouver Island inside of, in British Columbia. You can see there are 3 buildings there. The one to the far right is a active composting. It's also where they receive their organics. They mix it there and active composting in there. The middle building is a phase 2 where they do their maturation composting, and then the building on the left is where they do screening and storage. Just going to show you some pictures of each of these. So on the left, inside the first building, you can see they're doing receiving. They're also doing their mixing and grinding in that part of the building. And then on the right side, further back in the building, is where they have their active composting. Fully enclosed, meets all the requirements of mandates of the councils, as well as meeting their operational needs in the middle of winter. Then if we take a picture kind of looking back from that, you can see the GORE cover system. It's got our cover winding machine over the top. We use that to handle the covers, and you can see on the right side that receiving and mixing area. Screening and storage building in the front, it actually is not a full building. It's open on both ends, but it's a good area for them to do screening and storage. Just show you a couple other pictures. And our experience wasn't there. Our experience started in 2012 with our first indoor facility. This one happened to be right next to a parachute or skydiving airport. They were a little bit concerned about being a good neighbor, so they decided it was the first one we did where we put receiving, grinding, and phase 1 active composting in a building. What's also notable on this one is they put heat capture so they could capture the heat from the compost and use in greenhouses next door. Here's one other one in Ontario, doing biosolids, same thing. Here's another one that was up in British Columbia because of far north British Columbia, all to do with the weather, put it in a building, 2017. Just want to close with this. Our facilities have won a lot of awards. The solar-powered one won the National Waste Recycling Association Award for Organics Process of the Year for being unique. We have several facilities, one Composter of the Year, U.S. Composting, and as importantly, our clients are winning a lot of grant money because the regulators like our technology. In fact, there's been over 40 million in the U.S. and probably another 15 or 20 million up in Canada. Just in closing, just want to say a couple things. We are making investments in Australia. Our trenching system is one of the heaviest components, one of the bulkiest components. We have a production line that's coming online in Sydney by the end of Q3 this year. So if you are interested and you're buying technology from us, we're going to reduce shipping costs and reduce costs of supplying this market. I'm also here to say that GORE announced this last week that they have a PFAS or PFOA free cover. It's PE based, and if you follow GORE, they've been a responsible company for a number of years, and their footwear and their jacket line has all switched away from PFAS just because they want to be a responsible cover, and we're really pleased to announce that our cover going forward is going to be based on that technology. Right, but we had the PFOA family, right. So if you want to get a hold of me, there's my contact information. Jeff Hems, our local sales and service guru here in Australia and New Zealand. There's his contact information. If you want to learn more about our company, see us at the booth. There's our website, or you can reach out to our at info@sustainablegeneration.com. Thanks, everyone.